Some betrayals don't come with a warning shot. They linger in the air, the way your wife's perfume clings to an unfamiliar shirt, or the way laughter echoes from a locked phone at midnight. My name is Rylan Ventor, and tonight my marriage ends with the quiet click of a door and the scent of someone else's cologne. 8 months. That's how long Selah and I had been married when I found the folder. 8 months of thinking I'd finally gotten it right, that I'd found someone who understood what commitment meant. 8 months of believing in something that was apparently just another performance. I'm a systems analyst at Cortex Solutions, which means I spend my days debugging other people's mistakes and finding patterns where chaos seems to reign. It's methodical work that suits my personality. I like things to make sense, to follow logical progressions. Maybe that's why the discovery hit me so hard. Nothing about it followed any pattern I could understand. The morning started like any other Tuesday. Selah was rushing around our suburban Dallas apartment, grabbing her laptop bag and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm downtown, always impeccably dressed, always projecting that polished confidence that had first attracted me to her. "I'll be late tonight," she called over her shoulder. "Client presentation ran long, so we're doing dinner to close the deal." I nodded from the kitchen, not looking up from my coffee and the morning reports I was reviewing on my tablet. "No problem. I'll probably work late, too. Johnson wants the new security protocols tested before Thursday." She paused at the door, and I felt her eyes on me. When I glanced up, she was studying my face with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're okay with that? Me being out late again?" "Why wouldn't I be?" I asked, genuinely confused by the question. Something flickered across her features, relief maybe or disappointment. I couldn't tell which. "No reason. Just checking." The door closed behind her with that soft click, and I went back to my reports. If I'd known that sound would echo in my head for weeks afterward, I might have paid more attention to the way she hesitated before turning the handle. The discovery happened by accident, the way most life-changing moments do. Selah had asked me to upload some photos from our recent weekend trip to her cloud storage account since her laptop was acting up. She'd given me her login credentials months ago, back when we were still in that phase of marriage where sharing passwords felt like romantic trust rather than practical necessity. I was dragging files into her main photo folder when I noticed it, a directory labeled Private Archive with a lock icon next to it. My first instinct was to ignore it. Everyone deserves privacy, even in marriage. But something about the timestamp caught my attention. The folder had been created 3 days after our wedding, and the last modification date was just 2 weeks ago. Curiosity isn't always a character flaw, but sometimes it feels like one. I tried to open the folder and found it password protected. The logical part of my brain told me to close the browser and forget about it. The husband part of my brain started wondering what my wife of 8 months felt she needed to hide from me. I'm good with computers. It's what I do for a living. Breaking into a password-protected folder on an account I had legitimate access to wasn't technically hacking. It was more like finding a key someone had hidden under a doormat. The password turned out to be her maiden name combined with her birth year. Not exactly Fort Knox-level security. Inside the folder were 3 video files and a dozen photos. The first video file was labeled Bachelorette Final Night. My stomach started doing something uncomfortable as I clicked play. The video opened with shaky phone camera footage of what looked like an upscale private venue. I recognized several of Selah's friends from our wedding, all dressed in cocktail attire and clearly several drinks into their evening. The camera panned across a room that had been decorated with tasteless party supplies and featured a small stage area at one end. What happened next made me close the laptop and sit in silence for 10 minutes before I could bring myself to watch the rest. The video showed Selah and her friends participating in activities with hired male performers that went far beyond what anyone would consider appropriate for a married woman, or anyone in a committed relationship. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the timestamp showing this had been filmed 2 days before our wedding, and the metadata indicating it had been uploaded to her cloud storage 3 days after. She'd saved it. She'd kept it as some kind of trophy or memory, hidden away but accessible whenever she wanted to revisit that night. I watched all 3 videos and examined every photo with the same methodical attention I brought to debugging code. By the time I finished, I had a complete picture of my wife's bachelorette party activities and a growing understanding that the woman I'd married wasn't the person I thought she was. The photos showed various stages of the evening's progression, including several shots of Selah with different performers in states of undress that left nothing to interpretation. But what struck me most was her expression in these images. She wasn't reluctantly participating in some peer pressure situation. She was enjoying herself, directing activities, clearly the ringleader rather than a victim of circumstance. I spent the next hour going through the metadata and file properties, documenting everything with the same precision I'd use for a work project. Timestamps, file sizes, upload dates, modification history, all of it painted a picture of someone who had carefully curated and preserved these memories of her last night of supposed freedom. The venue information was embedded in some of the photos' location data. A quick online search revealed it was a private event space that required signed agreements for any recording or photography. I found their standard contract template on their website, which explicitly prohibited unauthorized recording and stated that any violations could result in legal action. Selah had signed that contract. I found a copy of it in another subfolder, along with receipts showing she'd paid for the venue rental and the performers. This hadn't been something that just happened to her. She'd planned it, organized it, and documented it. But the real revelation came when I traced the file access logs. These videos hadn't just been sitting dormant in her cloud storage. They'd been accessed regularly, downloaded, viewed, and in at least one case, shared via email to an address I recognized as belonging to her work account. She'd been sharing these videos with colleagues. I sat in our living room for 3 hours after making that discovery, staring at the wall and trying to process what I'd learned. This wasn't just about what she'd done before our marriage. This was about who she was as a person, and more importantly, who she'd been pretending to be with me. The woman who lectured me about leaving dishes in the sink, who insisted we needed to present a proper image to our neighbors, who made a point of mentioning how important discretion and respectability were to her career. That same woman had organized and documented activities that would have made a sailor blush, then shared the evidence with her co-workers. When Selah came home that night, she found me sitting at our dining room table with my laptop open and a printed timeline of my discoveries laid out in front of me. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "How was your day?" "Informative," I replied, not looking up from the documents. She moved closer, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw what was on my screen. "Rylan, what is this?" "I think you know what it is," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "The question is what we're going to do about it." Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally a kind of calculated calm that told me she was switching into damage control mode. "You went through my private files," she said, crossing her arms. "That's a violation of my privacy." "You gave me your login credentials," I reminded her. "And you've been sharing these files with your coworkers. Hard to claim privacy when you're distributing them yourself." She sat down across from me, and I could see her mind working, trying to find the right angle to minimize this. "That was before we were married. What I did at my bachelorette party doesn't concern you." "The upload dates say otherwise," I said, sliding the timeline across the table. "You saved these videos 3 days after our wedding. You've accessed them dozens of times since then, and you shared them with at least 3 different people at your office in the past month." Her composure cracked slightly. "How do you know about that?" "Because I'm good at my job, Selah. I know how to trace digital footprints. The question is why my wife of 8 months is sharing videos of her bachelorette party activities with her co-workers." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You're making this sound worse than it is. It was just party footage. Girls being girls. My friends at work thought it was funny. Funny, I repeated. That's what you call it. What would you call it? She shot back, turning to face me with her hands on her hips. A breach of contract for starters, I said, pulling up the venue agreement on my screen. You signed a no recording clause. What you filmed that night violated the terms of service you agreed to. Her face paled. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. This isn't just about what you did or when you did it. It's about the pattern of behavior it reveals. You organized activities that violated a legal agreement, documented them despite knowing it was prohibited, saved the evidence, and then distributed it through your work email system. I stood up and closed the laptop. But more than any of that, it's about the fact that you've been lying to me about who you are since the day we met. I haven't been lying, she protested. I just didn't think you needed to know every detail of my past. This isn't your past, Selah. You accessed these files last week. You shared them with Jennifer from your marketing team 4 days ago. This is your present. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. What do you want? She finally asked. I want to understand why the woman who married me thought it was appropriate to keep and share these videos. I want to understand what kind of person I actually married. She sat back down, and for the first time since I'd known her, Selah looked genuinely vulnerable. It wasn't supposed to matter. It was just something that happened, and then it was over. But you kept it. I kept it because... She trailed off, staring at her hands. Because it reminded me of who I used to be, before all the responsibilities and expectations and trying to be the perfect wife. So being married to me is a burden that requires you to pretend to be someone you're not? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She was quiet for a long moment. I meant that sometimes I miss feeling free, and those videos remind me of a time when I could do whatever I wanted without worrying about consequences. Without worrying about consequences, I repeated. Like the consequences of violating a legal contract? Or the consequences of sharing inappropriate content through your work email system? Her head snapped up. You wouldn't. I wouldn't what? You wouldn't report this to anyone. You wouldn't try to get me in trouble at work. I studied her face, seeing something there I'd never noticed before, a kind of entitled assumption that I would always protect her from the results of her own choices. Why wouldn't I? I asked. Because you love me. Because we're married. Because that's what husbands do. Is it? Is that what wives do too? Because I'm having trouble seeing how any of this fits that description. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Rylan, please. I know this looks bad, but it doesn't have to change anything between us. We can get past this. I pulled my hand away. How exactly do we get past the fact that you've been sharing explicit videos with your coworkers? How do we get past the fact that you violated a legal contract and documented the evidence? We get past it by focusing on us, she said desperately. On our marriage. On building a future together. What future? I asked. The one where you pretend to be someone you're not, and I pretend not to know who you really are? She didn't have an answer for that. I spent that night in our guest room, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide what to do next. By morning, I'd made up my mind. The law firm of Harrison, Mitchell & Associates specialized in cybercrimes and digital privacy issues. I'd found them through a colleague who'd used their services when his company had been hacked. They were discreet, professional, and experienced in handling sensitive digital evidence. Attorney Patricia Harrison listened to my explanation without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me over her reading glasses. Mr. Ventor, she said, I want to make sure I understand your situation clearly. You've discovered that your wife violated a venue contract by recording activities at her bachelorette party, and she's subsequently distributed this material through her workplace email system. That's correct. And you have documented evidence of both the contract violation and the workplace distribution? Yes, I've preserved all the metadata, timestamps, and file access logs. She made another note. What outcome are you seeking? I want to understand my legal options, both regarding the contract violation and the workplace distribution. I see. Are you looking to file a complaint against your wife, or are you seeking advice on how to protect yourself from potential fallout? I hadn't expected that question. I'm not sure yet. Right now, I just want to know what the legal implications are. She nodded. The venue contract violation is straightforward. If the establishment chose to pursue it, they could seek damages and potentially file criminal charges for violation of privacy laws. The workplace distribution is more complex. It could constitute harassment, creation of a hostile work environment, or misuse of company resources, depending on her employer's policies. And if someone were to report these violations? Any complaint would trigger an investigation. Her employer would be obligated to review the evidence and take appropriate action. The venue would have grounds for a civil suit and could request law enforcement involvement. I sat quietly for a moment, processing the information. Mr. Ventor, Attorney Harrison said gently, may I ask what your ultimate goal is here? Are you looking to reconcile with your wife, or are you considering ending the marriage? I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I'm just trying to understand what my options are. She slid a business card across the desk. I'd recommend you take some time to think about what you really want. If you decide to move forward with any kind of formal complaint, the process will be irreversible. Once these wheels start turning, they don't stop. I took the card and stood up. Thank you for your time. Mr. Ventor, she called as I reached the door. Whatever you decide, make sure it's something you can live with long term. Revenge has a way of consuming the person seeking it just as much as the person it targets. I drove home thinking about her words, but also about something else she'd said. Once these wheels start turning, they don't stop. Maybe it was time for some wheels to start turning. The next few days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. Selah and I moved around each other like polite strangers, maintaining the surface routines of our marriage, while both knowing that something fundamental had shifted. She left for work each morning with carefully neutral expressions, and I responded with equally careful politeness. But beneath that surface civility, I was methodically documenting everything. My background in systems analysis had taught me the value of thorough documentation. Every anomaly, every data point, every pattern of behavior, it all mattered when you were trying to understand how a system worked or why it was failing. I approached my marriage's collapse with the same systematic precision. I created encrypted folders on my personal laptop and began building a comprehensive record. Screenshots of the videos and photos, copies of the venue contract, email headers showing the workplace distribution, access logs from her cloud storage account, everything organized with timestamps and cross-references. What I discovered during this process was that the Bachelorette party videos were just the tip of the iceberg. Selah's digital footprint revealed a pattern of behavior that painted a very different picture of the woman I'd married. Her social media accounts, which she'd always kept private from me, showed a history of party photos and questionable activities dating back years. Her email correspondence with friends revealed conversations about manipulating boyfriends and maintaining multiple relationships simultaneously. Most disturbing were the messages I found between her and her sister Rebecca, sent just 2 weeks after our wedding. "How's married life treating you?" Rebecca had written. "It's fine," Selah had replied. "Rylan's sweet, but he's so serious about everything. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing house with someone's dad." "Are you happy, though?" "Happy enough. He's stable, he has a good job, and he worships the ground I walk on. Could be worse." "That doesn't sound very romantic." "Romance is overrated. Security isn't. Besides, I can always find excitement elsewhere if I need it." I read that exchange 3 times before the full implications sank in. She hadn't married me because she loved me. She'd married me because I was safe, predictable, and financially stable. Everything else, the affection, the intimacy, the shared dreams about our future, had been an act designed to maintain her security while she looked for excitement elsewhere. The phrase, "find excitement elsewhere," took on new meaning when I discovered her active profiles on 2 different dating apps. Both accounts listed her as single, both featured recent photos, and both showed message histories indicating ongoing conversations with multiple men. She wasn't just keeping videos from her past, she was actively planning her future infidelities. That night, I confronted her again. "We need to talk," I said when she came home from work. She set down her purse with a sigh. "Rylan, if this is about those videos again, I thought we'd moved past that." "We haven't moved past anything," I said. "We've just been avoiding the conversation." I showed her the printed copies of her messages with Rebecca and screenshots from the dating apps. Her face went white as she realized how thoroughly I'd investigated her digital activities. "You've been spying on me," she said accusingly. "I've been trying to understand who I married," I corrected. "And what I've found is that you've been planning to cheat on me since our honeymoon." She sat down heavily on our couch, staring at the evidence spread across our coffee table. "It's not what it looks like." "What does it look like, Selah?" "It looks like you don't trust me." "Should I trust you? Based on what evidence should I trust you?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, she said, "I never actually met any of those guys." "But you were planning to." "I was just keeping my options open." "Your options for what?" "For if things didn't work out between us." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at her. "You've been planning our divorce since our wedding day?" "Not planning it," she said quickly. "Just being realistic about the possibility. By maintaining active dating profiles and telling your sister you could find excitement elsewhere if you needed it." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm not good at this, Rylan. I'm not good at being a wife. I don't know how to be the person you want me to be." "I never asked you to be anyone other than who you are," I said. "But who you are isn't who you pretended to be." "I know," she whispered. "I know. And I'm sorry. Sorry for lying to me, or sorry for getting caught." She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. Over the next week, I made several important decisions. First, I consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my options and rights. Second, I began separating our finances and protecting my assets. Third, I started building a legal case for the contract violations and workplace distribution issues. But most importantly, I decided to give Selah one last chance to come clean and take responsibility for her actions. "I'm going to ask you some questions," I told her on Friday evening. "Your answers will determine what happens next." She nodded nervously. "Did you knowingly violate the venue contract when you recorded those videos?" "Yes." "Have you shared those videos with people at your workplace?" "Yes." "Are you currently maintaining dating profiles while married to me?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Have you been physically unfaithful during our marriage?" "No," she said quickly. "I haven't actually done anything with anyone else." "But you've been planning to?" Another hesitation. "I've been thinking about it." I nodded and made notes on my legal pad. "One more question. If I hadn't discovered any of this, would you have told me?" She started to speak, then stopped. "I don't know." "That's honest, at least," I said. She looked at me hopefully. "Does that mean we can work through this?" "It means I'm going to give you a choice," I said. "You can voluntarily resign from your job and remove all the videos from your cloud storage and any other location where they exist. You can delete your dating profiles and commit to complete transparency going forward. We can try marriage counseling and see if there's anything worth saving here. Or or I file formal complaints about the contract violations and workplace distribution. I provide your employer with evidence of your misuse of company resources and creation of a hostile work environment. I file for divorce and seek damages for fraud and emotional distress. She stared at me. You would really do that? Selah, you've lied to me about fundamental aspects of who you are since the day we met. You violated legal agreements, distributed inappropriate content through your workplace, and maintained active plans to cheat on me. What part of that suggests I should protect you from the consequences of your own actions? The part where you love me, she said desperately. Love isn't unconditional acceptance of harmful behavior, I replied. Love includes accountability. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, What if I can't resign from my job? What if I need the income? Then you should have thought about that before you used your work email to share explicit videos. And if I don't want to delete everything? If I think you're being unreasonable? Then you'll face the legal consequences of your choices, and I'll file for divorce. She stood up and paced to the window. This feels like blackmail. This is me offering you a chance to take responsibility for your actions before someone else forces you to, I said. The choice is yours. She turned back to me. How long do I have to decide? Until Monday morning. And if I choose to try to work things out, you'll really forgive all of this? I considered the question carefully. I'll try. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and trust will have to be rebuilt from scratch. I need to think about it, she said. I understand. That weekend, Selah spent most of her time on the phone with her sister and her friends, presumably discussing her options. I spent my time finalizing the documentation I'd need, regardless of her decision. On Sunday night, she found me in my home office. I've made my decision, she said. I looked up from my laptop. And? I think you're being controlling and unreasonable. I think you're trying to punish me for things I did before we were married, and I don't think that's fair. I nodded and saved the document I'd been working on. I see. I'm not going to resign from my job, and I'm not going to let you dictate what I can and can't keep in my personal files. Okay? That's it? Just okay? I closed my laptop and looked at her. You've made your choice, Selah. Now I'll make mine. Monday morning, I submitted a formal complaint to the Cybercrimes Division of the Dallas Police Department. The complaint included copies of the venue contract, evidence of the unauthorized recording, and documentation of the subsequent distribution through workplace email systems. I also sent a detailed report to Selah's employer's HR department, outlining the misuse of company resources and the creation of a potentially hostile work environment through the distribution of explicit material. Both submissions included complete chain of custody documentation for all digital evidence, timestamps proving the sequence of events, and legal analysis of the relevant statutes and policies that had been violated. Then I went to work and waited. The call came at 2:47 p.m. Mr. Ventor, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Dallas Police Department Cybercrimes Unit. We've received your complaint and reviewed the evidence you provided. We'll need to interview you and examine the original files. Can you come in this afternoon? Yes, I said. I can be there in an hour. Excellent. Bring your laptop and any other devices that contain the evidence files. The interview took 3 hours. Detective Chen was thorough, professional, and clearly experienced in handling digital evidence cases. She walked me through every aspect of my discovery, verified the authenticity of the files, and confirmed that the evidence supported charges for both contract violations and potential harassment. Mr. Ventor, she said as we concluded the interview, I want to make sure you understand what happens next. Once we initiate an investigation, it becomes a matter of public record. Your wife will be contacted and potentially arrested. Her employer will be notified. This information may become available to the media. I understand. And you're prepared for the personal consequences of this action? Detective Chen, I said. My wife has been lying to me about who she is since the day we met. She's violated legal agreements, distributed explicit material through her workplace, and maintained active plans to cheat on me. The personal consequences of her actions are what brought us here. She nodded. We'll execute the warrant tomorrow morning. I drove home that evening knowing that everything was about to change. Selah was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. How was your day? She asked, without looking up from the stove. Productive, I said. She glanced at me. You seem different, more relaxed. I feel more relaxed. That's good. I was thinking we could talk more tonight about finding a middle ground on everything. I sat down at our dining table and watched her move around the kitchen. Selah, there's something you should know. What's that? I filed the complaints today. She froze. You what? I submitted formal reports to the police and to your HR department. The investigation starts tomorrow. The wooden spoon she'd been holding clattered to the floor. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. Rylan, please tell me you're joking. Please tell me you didn't actually do this. I told you what would happen if you chose not to take responsibility for your actions. You made your choice. I made mine. She turned to face me, her face pale and her hands shaking. You have to stop this. You have to call them and tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. This will ruin my career. It will ruin my life. Your choices ruined your career and your life, I said quietly. I just documented them. She sank into the chair across from me. I can't believe you actually did this. I can't believe you thought I wouldn't. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then she said, What happens now? Now we wait and see how quickly the wheels turn. The answer, as it turned out, was very quickly indeed. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes everything seem sharper, more defined. I was at my desk at CoreTech by 7:30, working through system diagnostics and trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine while waiting for the inevitable phone call. It came at 9:15 a.m. Mr. Ventor? This is Detective Chen. The warrant has been executed. Your wife was taken into custody at her workplace approximately 30 minutes ago. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I understand. The media was present during the arrest. This may become a public story very quickly. How did the media find out? Someone at her office building called it in. When police arrive at a corporate office to make an arrest, word tends to spread. After hanging up, I sat quietly at my desk for several minutes, processing what had just happened. 8 months ago, I'd married a woman I thought I knew and loved. Now that same woman was sitting in a jail cell because of evidence I'd provided to law enforcement. The strangest part was that I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory or vindication. I felt empty, like someone had surgically removed a vital organ and left everything else intact but fundamentally changed. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Rebecca, Selah's sister. What have you done? I deleted the message without responding. By noon, the story had made the local news. Marketing executive arrested for digital privacy violations ran as a brief segment on the midday broadcast, complete with footage of Selah being escorted from her office building in handcuffs. The reporter mentioned that the arrest was related to unauthorized recording and distribution of explicit material, but didn't provide specific details. My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters, Selah's friends and family, even some of my own colleagues who'd seen the news and recognized her name. I turned off the ringer and let everything go to voicemail. That evening, I drove to the county jail to see Selah. I wasn't sure why. Maybe to understand how I felt about what I'd done, maybe to see if there was anything left of the person I'd thought I married. She looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the institutional clothing. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her face was puffy from crying. When she saw me through the reinforced glass, her expression cycled through relief, hope, and finally anger. "You came," she said into the phone receiver. "I came. Are you here to gloat?" "I'm here because I needed to see you." She stared at me for a long moment. "I lost my job. They fired me before I was even booked." I figured they would. The story is all over social media. Everyone I know has seen it. My parents, my friends, everyone at church. They all know what happened. I'm sorry about that. Are you? Are you really sorry, or is this exactly what you wanted? I considered the question seriously. I wanted you to take responsibility for your actions. I wanted you to be honest with me about who you are. I wanted our marriage to be based on truth instead of lies. And instead you destroyed my life. Selah, you recorded explicit videos in violation of a legal contract, then distributed them through your workplace email system. You maintained active dating profiles while married to me. You told your sister you could find excitement elsewhere if you needed it. I didn't destroy your life. I documented it. She was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Now you face the legal consequences of your choices. The district attorney will decide what charges to file. Your former employer will likely pursue civil action. The venue may sue for damages. And us? What happens to us? There is no us anymore, Selah. There probably never was. Her face crumpled. Please don't say that. We can fix this. We can get counseling, start over, do whatever it takes. Start over with what? With more lies? With more pretending to be someone you're not? I can change. I can be the person you want me to be. That's the problem, I said. I never wanted you to be anyone other than who you are. But who you are isn't who you pretended to be. So that's it? 8 months of marriage and you're just going to throw it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. I'm acknowledging what was never really there. She pressed her hand against the glass. I love you, Rylan. Despite everything, I do love you. Maybe you do, I said. But love without honesty isn't enough. Love without respect isn't enough. Love without commitment to being truthful about who you are. That's not love at all. That's just need. I stood to leave, and she became frantic. Wait, please don't go. Please don't leave me here alone. You're not alone because I'm leaving, Selah. You're alone because of the choices you made. I'll do anything. I'll sign any agreement, follow any rules, be completely transparent about everything. Just please don't give up on us. I looked at her through the glass. This woman I'd married, this stranger I'd never really known, and felt something settle into place inside me. The person I married doesn't exist, I said. She never existed. I can't save a relationship with someone who was never real. I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving her crying behind the reinforced glass. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. Selah's criminal charges and the documented evidence of her deception made it impossible for her to contest the dissolution or seek any significant assets. Her legal fees consumed most of her savings, and her employment prospects were severely limited by the public nature of her arrest. I kept the house, the cars, and most of our shared assets. She moved in with her sister Rebecca, who made it clear through intermediaries that she blamed me for destroying Selah's life. The criminal case took 4 months to resolve. Selah eventually pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges related to the contract violations and agreed to pay restitution to the venue. The workplace distribution issues were handled through civil settlements that cost her additional thousands in damages. Throughout all of this, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. Friends and colleagues expressed sympathy for what I was going through, but I struggled to explain that I wasn't grieving the end of my marriage, so much as coming to terms with the fact that my marriage had never been real in the first place. The final divorce decree was signed on a rainy Thursday in February, exactly 11 months after I'd discovered the videos in Selah's cloud storage. I drove home from the courthouse through empty streets, listening to the rhythmic sound of windshield wipers and thinking about patterns. Systems fail when their foundational assumptions prove false. Marriages fail when they're built on deception rather than truth. People fail when they prioritize short-term gratification over long-term consequences. Selah had failed to understand that actions have consequences, that lies have expiration dates, and that trust, once broken, can't be repaired through promises and apologies alone. I had failed to see the signs, to ask the right questions, to insist on honesty from the beginning. But failure, I'd learned, isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's just information, data that helps you understand how systems work and how to build better ones in the future. That evening, I sat in my living room now, legally and practically, and deleted the last of the evidence files from my encrypted folders. The investigation was complete, the legal proceedings were finished, and I no longer needed to document the collapse of something that had never been solid to begin with. My phone buzzed with a text message from Selah. "I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for lying to you about who I was. You deserved better than that." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I hope you figure out who you really are and find someone who loves that person." She wrote back immediately. "What about you? What happens to you now?" I considered the question as rain continued to streak down my windows and the house settled around me with the quiet sounds of a space that was finally, honestly, mine. "Now I start over," I typed. "This time with the truth." I sent the message, then blocked her number. Outside, the rain was washing the streets clean, preparing the ground for whatever came next. I sat in the silence of my reclaimed life and felt something I hadn't experienced in months, the possibility of genuine peace. The center had not held, but sometimes when the center is built on lies, its collapse isn't a tragedy, it's a liberation. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain, thinking about second chances and the difference between love and need, between forgiveness and accountability, between who people pretend to be and who they really are. Tomorrow, I would start building something new, something honest, something real. But tonight I would sit in the quiet satisfaction of having refused to pretend that lies were truth, that betrayal was love, or that I was obligated to protect someone from the consequences of their own choices. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of what had never been real, making space for whatever came next.